Welcome to a 6-part interim between the masterclass that was just happened on D.W. Griffith, and the finals are actually coming in, and several people of who I not even need to mention have already passed through the class, given ahead of time to Coursera that they would complete the duty of seeing the entire video, that these videos are optional. You can't collect credits for them, but they can keep you highly informed about the master classes that are coming. They count as real. Taking a class, just hearing from me what I'm about to expose to you in different ways over the next few weeks that we wait for masterclass to come back at the end of December, when we can start the spring semester, which is already in the dead of winter. And we just got our cold day today in Colorado, where this is being remotely put on, originally as a pirate that was taken seriously, and became a real class from Coursera, because I've taken almost all the Coursera classes you can possibly take, and as long as you fill in the bar and then turn in the professor gives the final, but then the final is graded, can be graded by to Coursera, as well as giving you units for the class. And that's how we established it. This master class was established when the phone itself implied that one day I had done so much work that masterclass was ready for me. But I had to go through YouTube creators, which I didn't become YouTube creators until I was doing that show. I think I've told a few of you masterclasses about that I used to co-direct with my cousins, Ashley and Amanda, and it was this show called Two Badass Businesses, and it was just this, we talked about it in the New York Drama Critic Circle, thought it was just like one of the greatest shows that was still on. It was during there was the time of the quarantine, and there was the time of the writer's strike, and there were all these blows to why the industry isn't all the way back now. And as struggling Colorado filmmakers always look out to say, well, we got the cult classics here because we got a lot of Colorado filmmakers that are all making cult classics, and that's because they're some of the only filmmakers that are still legally able to make films even in our post-COVID environment. It's kind of strange how that befell us on this region, but the Parks and Rec, as well as the Chamber of Commerce, have given me full permission to film indoor anywhere, outdoor anywhere in Grand Junction. Which you got to give it to Grand Junction. That's a policy that they gave me. I'd accept that as a really cool press pass from Grand Junction, and that's where I live, and I feel that that's the nicest thing they've done for me, and that was before I even graduated with my PhD. And here's the thing about that. I went after a PhD at California Institute of the Arts, and the thing about that is that you have to have other degrees pending, or at least one or two that have already gone through. Pending, the rest will go through as soon as you can connect them all with a published book, and a published book. I mean, you want a PhD, 3 published books and 1,000 poems. You offer them your portfolio, and then that's not enough, so then you offer them your references and how you're going to get more references and teach a class. And you set all these things up ahead of time and build upon them. Well, I've got to skip ahead because we're at postdoctoral range here in school, and that puts me in the top percentage of students of all. But there are some professors who have gotten more than 9, 10 PhDs. Like, I had to reveal that I had, as soon as I wanted, the Calarts writing PhD, which I don't know where else you could get a PhD in writing than Calarts, but it's a program there for a critical studies division in writing. And we've got to remember the critical studies part of it is so important, because it doesn't just mean we're being critics towards different things. It means if we're to be critical thinking about this at all, we're going to have to go into critical studies to find out what we should be critically thinking about when it turns to whatever the thing is that the critic is for. So it's not just like, we need a food critic. Well, everybody needs a food critic, but that doesn't change the process of what it means to be a critic, and what you've got to learn, the capabilities of that medium, of the thing your critical thinking skills are heightening, I think. And your critical thinking skills to a movie always makes it apparent that the movie is moving for some operational function. That's usually the operator or the auteur, which we have calmed into our studies as the director the eccentric director that makes controversial movies. We forgot to say that the controversial movies are a reflection of the inner mind of the eccentric director, and that's why they're controversial films, is because they're from the mind of an eccentric director. And doesn't that just define auteur out down through the ages and totally justify that whole Cecil B. demented thing where you become the director you love? And we've talked all about that in Masterclass, and we've had some fun in Masterclass. I had some people that have graduated all the way through, getting all the units so far, because they did the D.W. Griffith in a final question about, did life represent art, or did art represent life, or both, and tell why. And I'm not going to go through over that answer again. I already gave it in the previous masterclass. If you haven't seen the answer to that you can turn in an essay rebuilding that idea, and you should get your A grade and your passing grade, and you should be good to go picking the 4 units that class was worth. But it was a lot of lectures, so you're sitting there going, we did do a lot of work, but it was a lot of lectures in a row. And I thought, well, I have enough information for all 16 lectures, and I'm going to give them all information for all 16 lectures of the Tarantino class, which is next semester. And I know I've talked about all these things, but we've got to go back to before Masterclass, when I was in creators and making 2 badass businesses, and then they suddenly hired me to Masterclass when I was so far ahead of the game that I was turning in projects every week. I was turning in like a master to one of my audio tracks that is a full album. It's like an hour-long master track that I've put together of the full album, streaming media, that the music just keeps gushing out like a fountain. It's beautiful. And then, I've been doing the music with Poor White Trash, and that's my music guy, and he's one of the 6 Poor White Trashes who's known as Poor White Trash, and he's one of the top 2, and he's number 2, actually, usually on the charts when it comes to Poor White Trashes, although there's so many already albums by him that he's just going to keep releasing albums like he's Frank Zappa or something, because he comes from kind of the Zappa appeal. And was The Dead Tell Your Riders. Now, the story behind that never even got printed in the Ballad of the Dead Tell Your Riders, which stopped after album 18, and there were 42 albums, so you can see there's a huge abundance of story of my band that I've been keeping, in not on Masterclass, but this should all be documented on Masterclass. I had a band since 2015 called the Dead Tell Your Riders, and they ended actually when Poor White Trash decided to go make his own solo career. And the Dead Tell Your Riders could actually have a comeback, but they probably won't, because they switched band members since the first 2, and then all throughout the third, through the ending, it was almost a solo act, except there was a few people that helped out with the making of the Dead Tell Your Riders, and you know who you are. But the thing is even my cousin Ashley, who had done 2 badass businesses, came in through and made a media album, streaming media audio for the internet, that's really good. And it's almost like everybody put their best foot forward on all my projects, and that was so appreciated, and everything came out right and was good for a portfolio that needed PhD acceptance. And so the movies were often cast as the master's thesis or master's of fine arts thesis, where the movie is cast and the script's cast. But the books, the nonfiction, the 30 books I wrote, plus all the poetry that I was offering these different schools, and to have the references that I needed for the getting through, and that I had applied for a lot of jobs that had taken a lot of work to apply to. And technically, here's the really funny part, and I probably told you some of this in the last time I did my own bio, but the fact that I got like extra PhDs was already scary, because proving that is kind of like hard when hardly anyone has ever approached trying to get the PhD at Calarts, although there have been 37 others besides me that have gotten it, and 15 others that had less of a GPA but still pretty much have the doctor. And that puts me at the bottom of the PhDs that got their degree there, but it doesn't really accentuate that I'm going to like rise to the top. It's just like, this is where he settled in the great grand magic information is the 37th of their school of all time at California Institute of the Arts. So they're expecting big things from me, and I'm expecting to deliver big things. And wasn't it big things we delivered upon the writing graduation? Because I had to deliver 12 of each thing. I had to deliver 12 scripts. But this was all from a timer that was before time, because it could be any time after my undergraduate years were over. Even if I'd started a project in my undergraduate, I could bring forth and finish it in some way in graduate school and make it even better and start over on everything and make new things. And suddenly I realized that I had been making product. Like for years, I hadn't made enough product, and I was always getting caught up in these essential products that were made up, and then to self-destruct on me, so many of my papers to self-destruct on me, that this masterclass has worked so good to keep my ideas like practically in a journal, but in a professor teaches you kind of way, because that way we can all settle on what we're still doing in postdoctoral school. And that is, it appeals to me that I'm handing in this information to Walt Disney and Calarts, and that is he's taking most of my later projects, if not all of my later projects, and has come by and helped me out with so many of my books, music, and movies, now owned over by that Walt Disney's Calarts moniker. And I think that's great, because that's where I got the final PhD. You know, if I got the other 10, they're still count, and they're still beautiful degrees. And I look at my UCLA PhD, and I'm like, I'm so glad I was able to make a UCLA silent archive. And all it takes is taking UCLA and silent to the YouTube thread, and there's my dedicated museum almost sitting there to UCLA. And it's like the archive's getting better, and I'm finding more things, and there's more movies to put in there. There's more movies that are surrounded by getting lost on YouTube. It's like the file can slip out and disappear onto YouTube, and then suddenly it gets recommended to you right when you need it, and you can switch it over right to the UCLA archive if you're me, because I run that archive for the silent film, and it was a really tricky business to get into. I can't go into the ins and outs of getting hired by UCLA for a silent film archive, but I guess once you have authority to put brand names on your work, which we do at Plato's Cave Experience, because we have Masterclass and a few other jobs that we've been working at before, even and after the PhD came through, which the Calarts one came through after the Masters of Fine Arts had been pushed through. I decided to see if I could commute my other masters that I had to get, as well as my Library of Congress status. Library of Congress rehired me after working for them for the archive, and they backdated me to the beginning of my application to them, which is in 2002. So I actually had this lease on my information that was like, I had promised, because I was getting scholarships for undergraduate, I had promised the professors that I would have to get my PhD to pay it all off, and so many promises were made to me that if I got my PhD, they'd pay it off. And really, that wasn't the general story. When I got the PhD, everybody was paying it off anyway, and I didn't even know what was going on, except that I had LinkedIn access to the grades and to what I'd done in school and all the other schools, and was able to make my resume as good as I could. But it was seemingly not enough, because if I have 10 PhDs, that means like 100 jobs just to hold down my PhDs, which in the film business, you can kind of get away with that, because you have a job at Sony, you have a job at, like Paramount, you have a job at Warner Brothers, you have a job at DreamWorks. When you got a job for Hollywood, or a job that's at least Hollywood approved, or something that they've put up for years and even has an MPAA rating score on it, these are now movies that are being taken seriously, although they were art films kind of coming from an experimental student film angle. That's why we do postdoctoral, not that it isn't professional, but the student angle on all of these things was really impressionable to the era of cultural leaf when all this came through, because the COVID had completely quarantined like almost everyone in the world. Like, I remember finding out people were stuck in quarantine wherever they were. and it was a real horrible time. Well, I was still up and at 'em, and I never got sick or anything, so I was able to make movies through the whole thing. And during the quarantine, we were able to contact some bands and get the back duty of making sure it was cool to have their music on Two Badass Businesses and throughout to Orgy the Damned and all those movies we did. But it was around the time of 2020 that there was this article in U.S. News and World Report. It was just at the end of 2019 or something. And it said, we're looking for culture relief. If you've made anything, an artwork of music, movies, or books especially, and that's when I started turning them in anyway, getting Penguin Random House to support my streaming novels, and my streaming media was constant ever since Dead Tail Riders came back, and YouTube Masterclass signed on and helped us get all the studio support and MPAA, and now they actually play wherever they play legally. You can actually make money off of them if you put them on your site, and these movies attract people to their site, and then they have more view counts just for them. The people are given permission to do that with more work, and it's because it makes it for the company it's attached to anyway on my YouTube page, which we would take a look at, but I feel there's no need to have to prove just because I have computer evidence of all of this. You can do the right searches and see where, the Aaron Sheely line falls with me completing these like Ripley, believe it or not, standards of getting a 10 PhD score. My PhDs were from Austin, they were from Santa Barbara, they were from Columbia, NYU, BYU of all places, Liberty of all places, Berkeley, and Stanford, Chapman, University of Boulder gave me degrees. There was Harvard, of course, which we teach some of the Masterclass for, but that was one of the ones that was designed was so we could see if we could bring even a film school to Harvard. And on a small scale, very small scale, like snail scale, but we've brought a small film program to Harvard that's actually working and going into its next, which will be its fourth semester. And that is, of course, the Tarantino as auteur, so we can then hear about a director that's still heralded as a hero rather than D.W. Griffith, who was ultimately maligned into his future existence of being alone in jail and like not really revolutionary anymore. It's counter to the revolution, although nobody knew that to lock D.W. Griffith up, the guy who was trying to legalize weed the whole time. That he got locked up because he said that his African American friends needed to play jazz, which is already a racist statement. I don't want to go into it. But that he did buy them lots and lots of weed, like he said he would. They say that with Louis Armstrong being your friend, you've got to put your money where your mouth is. And I guess Griffith really took to that as meaning he should put his money where his mouth is. And I'm really happy about that fact because here I occupy the Griffith chair. Now, the Griffith chair came to me in a funny way the other day because I was looking on Apollo IO at my references, and one of them shows that I've got the reference of the Pulitzer Publishing and how I run that social media, and it was showing that a book of mine, a BFI book, an introduction to Birth of a Nation, a shot-by-shot analysis of Birth of a Nation by Aaron Sheely, BFI, and all those things took, and now the Pulitzer Awards are even considering it again. I've already won, and then they're considering it again as the big win of what they'd like to say is my nonfiction, historical, political piece that's all come together. And it's like this book that I had to release to all America. And I was the guy behind the Birth of a Nation book that was haunting everybody. Even after the ending, it wasn't later until conclusions were drawn further about the missing volumes of the Griffith story, whereas there was a sort of lack of interest during the film school booms of the eras in which George Lucas was going to school at USC. He wasn't really in knowing that he was supposed to watch a Griffith film, although they did introduce him to that idea because Griffith did in fact was one of the founding fathers of the USC Film School. And so I'm sure Lucas was inundated with the Griffith, information even back then, but it was probably a very different look at it because then it was okay to cast shame on him. And I'm not saying it's not okay to cast shame on him, but I don't shame anybody. In my criticism, I tell you what I like about it and only what I like about it. I mean, I can tell you what I didn't like about some things that I've made. There's only really one or two, maybe 5 out of 100 works of mine that I'd reject as not my works anymore, or something I'd rather not see or hear from again, that image or those sounds, only because they didn't work. But in 100 that worked, and I can't even sit here and name, there's 50 of the Badass Businesses ones. There's 15 of those Oracles ones, those hour-long music movies that are in LA, Denver, and Grand Junction. Those are great movies. I mean, I made those over time when I didn't have a band yet, and then I focused all on the band, and the band is still going. It's not the Dead Tellurriders anymore necessarily, but it's Pro White Trash, and so we're good. But I came before you today, and we have a few minutes left. We're only going to cast shadow on these references for a little while. I'm actually in the middle of a big book deal, and the irony is I'm only stocked with about 10 of my own authored books that I was able to come across some other books and give them to the Pulitzer Prize from other authors. Was an interesting story, but one I'm not going to go into here because actually some people are embarrassed about their work until it's seen and then it's awarded, and then they're like, it was me, I was some delivery boy to the award, and they're like, let's publish a copy on your maze of a thing. So this is the amazing deal I get as all of my work's now more popular because I was associated with these Pulitzer winners that were coming in through the door. And they'd already won it with a certain amount of audiences they'd had for their work. And I won't really go into any names or anything, but if you do notice like a celebrity guest on my site, celebrity guests were always welcome. We had a certain point where the celebrity guest is always welcome in my world, and especially in making movies, but I was amazed at how many of them had sailed past me, even in the literary world. And here I am with like these 10 books that showed up for it, from Genji the Summoner until we just hit with Starship Illuminati. And Starship Illuminati, we're going, that's a great book, but Genji the Summoner seems like still the pinnacle of Aaron Shealy's career. And Aaron Shealy is the same guy that brought us Paradise Faust and Flying Dutchman, which both turned into 2 novels that Flying Dutchman couldn't be done on screen or on stage in so many ways, is the whole point of it. That it's a standalone script, not really, but that it is a novel, even in its hybridity, doesn't change the fact that I did turn in 12 scripts and saved the planet, which was even in the Webverse, which was the one that played for USA Today as my book of the year in 2010, Edge Towards Oblivion. Now, I've got a lot of things mapped out on my books right now. When I finished Starship Illuminati, I started looking over my options at seeing what to write next would be. And since I organized some more of these like really great writers that were like celebrities, there was like celebrity guest writers, but they were already writing something. Excuse me one moment, folks. They were already writing something that was coming from their own ability to not just, like if they were a pop star, they didn't just write music, they wrote books too. And I was look over the books and see if they were worthy and stamp them worthy. And I was already stamping them worthy by like page 5, because all of them were these like really creative minds coming together and creating work, and they're still doing it. And I got to see a little example of that earlier tonight, and it's exciting. But I had to wait until I had permission to enter my own masterclass that I kind of teach underground, and that is where I get a hold of the certain celebrity guests to be the writer of a certain book. Then they take the book from there. But then if there's one that is in a series that I need completion of, is what I'm looking at here. Is this my next novel that I'm going to be writing, and it's kind of the one I'm working on the outline for now, and it's called Shadow Puppet. And I know it's a really strange title and could be taken in some kind of way that's, not connotating exactly the best ethic that you wanted to connote. But shadow puppet could be that it's a demon. It could be that it's a ghost. It could be that it's a demon ghost that can make puppet, that can animate life, that can keep puppets, that can use a body as a puppet. But it's not that. It's actually a real puppet, like, in Prague, where there's those animatronics like Disneyland that like come out, but they do the three penny opera at the Prague Theater with all this really good. It's not just a made up thing that they were showing in City of Nine Gates, which just came out. And I'm so honored to think, since I helped these novels be seen by Pulitzer, not to win anymore, because I don't know what Pulitzers have been awarding me, but they've awarded me heftily. And I can't even trace back the whole thing. But that my BFI book was suddenly splashed on there as the Pulitzer Way for All, at least on my site. So it's like they drew one, then they drew another, then they drew another, and now they're still drawing them from my work. It's really wild. It's because it goes viral, and then 1 million people have read it. And once 1 million people have read it, it's pretty much Pulitzer worthy, which means the internet is harder but easier to get one here. There's still more to come. I don't know who's all going to come out of this. I'm not like doing it to like throw celebrity names around. I'm trying to showcase writers, especially female writers, as though their work is better and is worth spending time releasing under my own sort, because then I get this notorious fan cult for the whole thing that then follows the sort of celebrity more than they ever had, but that sort of makes the site more valuable. And this is what's really interesting, is the third Telemarker trilogy book is Shadow Puppet, and it's about the puppet that starts out in Spain, who gets killed by Don Quixote, turns into a shadow puppet, finally finds his way to Prague, and ends his career in China before he's picked up at the airport in Hong Kong and made to work in horror movies. In America, it could be called Puppet Master, but it's called Shadow Puppet. Now that's because when he's going from scenography to scenography, which is told linearly this time, then he's going to be in his shadow form as he transitions, right? Is the idea of the book. And it sounds like a real experimental book. Like in someone else's hands, it may have turned into a Pulitzer winner, but I cannot break any rules, and I've got to only steam to what I've got next. But people are like, well, it's been a long time already since Starship Illuminati, hasn't it? And I'm like, well, I thought a Starship Illuminati just happened, but then I got these files in to keep my file cabinet full. Then I have these very, nearby projects that are coming at me, like the Telemarker trilogy just kind of came in and slowed everything down in a good way to a working condition. It's going to actually have to drive me to finish the third book. And that, again, the third book, the first you have City of the Nine Gates. And now we all know that that was written by Jessica Alba, and I had absolutely hardly any contact with any of these people. And she did this book on City of Nine Gates that was from her journal on some of the things she'd seen in Europe but didn't somehow but make up. And maybe I've talked to her over the phone. I'm not really at liberty to say of what amount I was able to talk to her about it. I just told her she was, had her 1 million views, had her Pulitzer, had all that, and like that happened to a certain number of celebrity guests. And I thought, well, that's because I can give it right to these guys who are about to stamp approval on anything I give them, but they're not. They read through it like with a critical edge. And so there's your critical studies thing again, needing the Pulitzer Prize, because you need that for your critical edge to be like, if Roger Ebert had one, I've got to get one type thing. And there were other people I could have considered in the Pulitzer Prize winning later in their career, but it doesn't seem like it's totally fair, but it is, because all of a sudden, even my cousins were getting them for some theater work they did for me that was really their idea in the first place, really. So they ended up winning these awards, and it was all this, you know how you've got to just, when you go to check your movies on a commercial website, And if the award follows that around and says you can pay for your award now, and that's the secret, everybody has to pay for their award. But I still have that one from when I won 3 film festivals with Order of the Damned. Now I've made a movie called Lazy Smoker, and it won Venice, and it won Sundance, and it won Cannes Film Festival, Lazy Smoker. It won Berlinale and Toronto film festivals. It was one of the only non-AI made movies, so it really was beating everybody out as Best Picture. It's probably going to get a Best Screenplay Oscar, which will be not what they say wins. It's an honorary one for having also directed 3 movies this year. I made a movie called Lazy Smoker. I made a movie called Dark Lord, and we can maybe get into talking about that at other times, but we're about running to the middle of time of where we could be if we were asked to go on from here about our career in Masterclass. That there's a few points I'll wrap up on. The point I'm trying to make about the Telemarker trilogy was that it was together that we formed the idea of it, even with who I've told you helped out with the City of Nine Gates. And the new one I can't tell too much about, but the third one's going to be the newest one that hasn't even begun to be written yet, just an outline of Shadow Puppet. And I think that's cool to make a transition from country to country as a shadow or a ghost that can get back into puppet form, ideally to bring life to the puppet show. So that's just, one of the small ways to look at all the different things I've been putting together and doing in my part to stay in postdoctoral college. Like, there's other things I have to do. I can make Criterion issued movies if it's the right movie and the right choice, and I don't do those as much because I've done so many that I've even got Dark Star under the Criterion label. And this is a good day for me because now I can't remember if the Laserdisc of Dark Star was Criterion. It may have been Janus Films. I don't know what all they put in their stock, but they want all stock that they can, and they don't just subjugate you to one genre or another. This is not necessarily a mainstream company, these Criterions, but they love a good mainstream spin on everything that goes on in their industry. So, now you see how I've got the writing going on in the postdoctoral that is staying on top of my own novels while releasing a couple more guests. I can't do too many more guests to my site because then it would look like someone else's site and not my initial site, and percentages of how many books I'm supposed to have out. And though it looks like I'm caught up, it looks a little behind schedule too. And isn't that the point of teaching? You're always ahead and behind schedule. If you're one class away from being to your last class, then you're ahead of schedule. But if you're at the last class, then you're behind schedule because you still need an extra day to finish. But I've done chatted all you need to hear for now. I mean, there's the books, the novels, these great non-fictions like my Griffith book, and now there's novels like NG the Summoner, which is a huge hit on the internet, And then my movies, well, I got to Lazy Smoker and I won every award in the world. I think that was a pretty good movie. It was a good one. And then going on to Dark Lord Scary, I do know this on rapport that Terry Gilliam was one of the ones that really was confident that he liked Dark Lord quite a bit. And it's about the Dark Lord of Hell coming to his son Damien of the Omen to wake up his Antichrist self and get ready for school because they're late. So he starts reading him the Necronomicon when he's late for school, and then it's got this whole problem with being kind of comedic, but then you realize they're taking it reverently and they're having their whole black mass in front of you and they're doing all these subliminal things with the editing, and the music's all subliminally turning into the image. It's a really trippy film. I mean, when you see it, they're totally talking about these burgeoning views of what it would be like to just live in hell forever, which is what they want. Between them, really not sure why they're having this talk, even though he's still late for school. And I mean, it just plays out that way. And then the last one I'll tell you about is the long lonely walk to the dispensary, which is my underrated one of the years, where it has actually compromised a little bit and used an unrealistic spot to drop off and pick up, just to make him look lonely when he gets back, when there's no car to drop him off waiting for him, and that he had to make this walk, and that he came back to a specific point doesn't mean there's necessarily the optimism that he gets home all right. We do have the optimism that he still has weed left, so he's not. You're never lonely when Mary Jane's around, is the point of that movie. You're lonely until Mary Jane shows up, and then you're not lonely anymore. Am I wrong? But we'll talk more about Masterclass and what it means and how to get units from each class. The 16 classes gives you 4 units. The summer classes give you 3. I will be teaching summer school on the Western after Tarantino concludes. We'll probably wait a month or two, maybe just a month, and go straight into the Western, which will be 12 classes, and it'll be worth 3 units, because it's for each 4 classes you get a unit, and that's really how you can get units at Coursera. And I've heard, one last thing I'll leave you with, I've heard you can take these master classes almost any school you go to. Like, you can definitely see the regular ones if you take them and pay for it, but these are freelance. I mean, these are like given out, so the schools, USC, Calarts, and Harvard, have these platforms of me as professor, making sure I'm filling in the gaps for what needs to be taught in film school, particularly with the subject of film, which is why I brought up UCLA too, because I'd gotten my PhD from UCLA, which is really hard to do. To get a film school PhD from UCLA is no joking around, and I directed this movie in Compton that sort of made my angle look like I was diverse and multicultural and could make films even when homeless. So I had the full armed, I had the royal flush. It was cultural leaf time. They needed all the artwork turned in that they could get. So here I turn in this 244 piece portfolio, all to the direction of getting the Calarts PhD. And over time and over pressure, it came in 2020 after all the work was done. But then all the work of talking about it lasted about 5 years. We should have gotten into Masterclass sooner, but we had to wait to actually be adapted in. That I've seen all the videos for creators in Masterclass, and that I've been asked to make YouTube videos for Masterclass, not just the ones where I'm talking about my professorship, which is certainly enlightening, even that I have a D.W. Griffith chair that is showing up on my Pulitzer site. It's like, what more are they going to honor me for? I love it. But they're honoring me because really I didn't go down the artificial intelligence well of what can my computer write for me instead of what I can write for my audience, who's so big now that I'm actually bolstering my guest relatives that were kind of bolstering me. But it's taken some time on these novels. I wrote all those 40 books in a matter of 20 years. It took 20 years, but some of them, the last 20 of those of the nonfiction books that I wrote a few years ago, that was for college, it was for school. It came through in a lot of powerful productions, like Time Magazine was there. There were a lot of production. USA Today was there, and they were all there at the beginning for the Webverse. They were all there for the poetry book. Critical Decathlon Pages was a big one, but the Pulitzer and all the published articles really for my graduate school conclusion, except for the reference department I'm still in at Calarts. They helped me, for instance, on my National Geographic essay by bringing me the right information of research, which you have to do in a science writing. But if you take a look at this, and I'm sorry to keep you going, we could talk for a few more minutes. I guess we have about 5 more minutes, it looks like. And here are some of the places I can write for online with the Supercritic Fun Pass. I can write for Atlantic, AV Club, which means like The Onion, Time, National Geographic, USA Today, New York Drama Critic Circle, New York Times, NYU.edu, The Village Voice, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Playboy, New York. So I could go on, and you'd be all amazed by all the other places that I didn't even. Rolling Stone is one of my big ones. My two most important jobs besides Masterclass are the Library of Congress and Wizards of the Coast. Now, the reason Wizards of the Coast is still the most important job in a way is because they had made this deal that they were going to give me the same amount of money in real money as I had ever made on a high-scoring video game, and I said I have $60 billion on Final Fantasy 15. Can we turn that into real money? And the Wizards of the Coast are thinking, well, it'd be hard to do, although some of that came from real money that was not meant to be yours, that you blew everybody up and took all their money right when they were coming after you, even on autopilot. Well, we don't know quite if we want to give you the juicy details of that, but I don't know if they're ever going to turn that into real money. It'll be like crypto money. It'll be like money I have. That's what they're probably, and since I'm a freelancer, even as a professor, I'm going, I didn't ask you for the money. Hopefully we can raise some money for the department and you can make money off of this, My producers make all the money anyway, because they're the ones that invested originally in any of this. None of this would have happened if I didn't have such strong producers. You think any of this movie, music, and book world would work out in such a way that it's working out for me. Finally, after I have the PhD, it all works out. But the postdoctoral is still strenuous because you need 244 at the whistle-blown moment. You need 244 to deliver the whole account back to Calarts as though you've completed the 6-year, 8-year postdoctoral studies. And this was going to be fun because no one else really joined me for this except for I still have friends that are at Calarts. I can't really mention names as much anymore now that I'm on the staff directory, only because it is kind of a conflicting interest that we even team up and put our heads together and see what to do anymore with some of these guys that have been there with me the whole way. They've kind of cut me loose. I'm seeing what it is I can do on my own. I'm trying not to break any eternal rule, like by having a statement that I make come out about a person that are in the wrong way. I've had some division where there almost was occurrences of, the safety guide kicking in and saying, did anything go wrong? And, you write about what goes wrong sometimes. So even with Harvard, so they can maybe see you can do better. But who's been there through the whole thing with the producers? Because they've all seen it as a good thing ever since it was successful in the first place when they joined in. And so they just pretty much, they take the pay. And if if there's any reason that they should take the pay, it's because they put the pay in. It's at least to expect someone to break even, isn't it? I mean, if they put the money in, they get the money out. It's no problem with me. And then here's the real wild part, is that I have a broken left hip, so it keeps me from driving a car, and that keeps me somewhat disabled and living off of expensive insurance. But that I can take my Masterclass money and my money from Library of Congress and Wizards of the Coast or wherever else it's coming from, and all these companies I listed to you that I've written articles for before, can then go back to the producers who very much opened that door to the PhD, opened the door to the extras like the Pulitzer, which was a big win for me. For 10 years I had to prove it, and finally everything gets proven. And I'm a judge on the board, and I'm finding all these females that automatically had awards just by the look at the amount of people that have looked at their work. Even on my site, on my release, it went viral. And that was just one proof that this whole things were ranking Pulitzer all over them. So if you have any more questions or specifically want to know something, we're going to throw another one of these videos up in a week or two, and we'll keep you posted on things to come. Remember, if you want to take the Tarantino course, it's in December 27th is the first class, and there will be 16 classes as usual, and it'll be 4 more units, which would bring the units up to 8 that you could have earned there. 11 originally, that's 19 units you could potentially have after the spring semester, and then with the 3 more units of the Western, 22 units in 2 years. And 22 units in 2 years is still the amount of barely getting by on a sophomore year. So we're not going anywhere. We're teaching for a while. The reason we're doing these inserts is so you don't feel lonely or think I've abandoned post or anything. We're all systems go, and we thank the producers for helping us so much, and also for the companies that were able to use us as freelance and make any money on time and effort that they spent putting all this around the internet. Then of course they get their end of the not having to branch out to me specifically to pay me, but that the producer should get the whole value practically of everything, because they opened those doors, they paid those fees, and it was a drop in the bucket to them in a way. But then I'm like, well, can't I at least secure that I somehow break even on all this? Isn't that every writer's dream, is to break even, like I did with my debt and like I did with my school debt as well? It's all broke even now. I'm like, these monies are made payable too, and I'm sitting here with a messed up hip going, this is the class I go through because I can do this even without my leg totally working. And that's the cool thing about being a professor, is you can have like these like maladies every once in a while that kind of hold you back or put you in like a different position than you would like to be in. But then if you recognize the skill, recognize what you can do as a writer, recognize there are even movies that can be made, and there will be more movies, there will be more music. I mean, feature films, not just Dungeon Master, but feature films will be coming out next year, and it's an exciting docket. And really, since Genji the Summoner to Starship Illuminati is only 10 books, I'm sitting there going, that's amazing, because I was just spending as much time releasing these other books that will soon reach their extent of what they can be as a push to see all in a series, which now I'm doing the volume 3 of the Telemarker trilogy, Shadow Puppet. And it's so wild because the guest celebrities were covering the other bases, and I thought, well, this is not going to give anything away, because all we ever do is talk on the phone, and sometimes their voice talent comes over the movie. But we can't talk too much about that because we're all sworn to secrecy by the producers. Now, thank you all for listening in on this credential volume, partial credentials of Dr. Aaron Sheely, PhD, Calarts in Writing. That we thank YouTube Masterclass, Library of Congress, Wizards of the Coast, and all the other jobs, like Rolling Stone, for instance. That's a big one. And for having written in the journal Black Clock for Calarts when reminded and needed to be reminded, and thanks to the people that reminded me to get back on that Black Clock deal and make sure it was closed, because that's kind of one of the instructions you have when you've gotten a PhD and it's all signed off on your temporal trials so far. Anyway, all right, we'll see you next time. I'll be back with some more information later.